The villains. For every good guy, there must be the bad guy. Society looks upon villains with disdain because they refuse to follow the rules. But are these villains really bad or misunderstood? Are they truly out for chaos and blood? Or are they more willing to get out of their comfort zones than the average Joe? Join us for our Villain of the Month discussion. We will break down their philosophy, their past, and their psychology. And then you decide for yourself if these villains are humans or if they are monsters.
All right, welcome back to another Villain of the Month stream with your favorite host Sigma Jones, as well as some of the some of the wanted people that are here, like my good friend Isa Sama. First and foremost, we just want to give a shout out to our subscribers. Thanks for listening in. Thanks for tuning in. We truly appreciate the love and support. Hope you all are doing well this evening or this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are around the world. So, as you see from the title of the stream, it's another one of those Villain of the Month, and today's stream is going to be about none other than Mumm-Ra. But before I get started, I definitely got to introduce one of the members here of our Villain of the Month series, and everybody, you know his intro already.
All creatures need to obey. No one can survive without trusting someone they feel is better, more worthy than themselves. To avoid that responsibility, those who are worthy look even higher, searching for more superior beings. And those superiors do the same, looking for even stronger individuals they can believe in. That is how all kings are created. It is also how gods are born.
None other, Mr. Isa Sama. How's it going, sir?
Salute, good sir. I'm doing good. Just excited to have another one of these, and always enjoy these.
Awesome, awesome. And we just got another member to join in, and y'all already know the intro for Mr. Logic's Finest.
I'm so disappointed, Ichigo. So very disappointed. Sadly, your sword exhibits only fear. When you counter, it's because you fear being killed. When you attack, you fear killing. And when you try to protect someone, you fear you could let them die. The only thing that your sword speaks of is senseless fright. And that's not good. What you do not need in battle is fear. Nothing will come of it. You counter, you don't let them cut you. If you protect someone, you don't let them die. When you attack, you kill.
Right on. Mr. Logic's Finest. How's it going, good sir?
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good, good.
Good
How's it
afternoon.
going from down under?
Hey man, good, good. Had a It was a great day. Another day. Went out cycling, and in a few more hours, it's gonna be the late afternoon, and then my buddy is back home from work. His sons are home from school, and then we pull out the ATVs. So, you know,
Ooh.
Sounds like fun.
that's daily, man. This place is awesome. Like I said, man, I try to go once or twice every year. The place is just like one giant theme park. Um, I love it, man. It's awesome, man. It's a nicer, cleaner America. The place is more like America than Britain. The people are nicer. The cities are clean. The culture is awesome. It's and then they have a huge racing culture, drag racing, and the V8s and muscle cars, and the ATVs and the cycling. It's awesome, man.
Very awesome. Already putting that on my list. Another continent to visit. So, man, that is great. And before we get started, we're joined by another one of our co-hosts for the stream, and that is Dr. Phoenix. How's it going, good sir?
How you doing?
Oh,
Pretty
very
good,
good.
sir. You?
Awesome,
I'm
Doc.
doing
Awesome.
well. I'm doing well. Oh, I couldn't miss this. Couldn't miss this one. This discussion about Mumm-Ra because I grew up watching the Thundercats. So yeah. So this is one of my favorite shows of all time. Well, one of my favorite animated shows of all time.
That is an interesting statement that you grew up watching Thundercats because if memory serves, it came on the air in '84. Were you even alive in '84?
Uh, no, I caught the reruns.
Ah, okay, all right.
Yeah, I caught the
Not
reruns.
trying to,
They,
not,
by the time I was able to watch the show, they still, believe it or not, they still had a lot of the toys out. So I had quite a bit of the toy. Well, I had pretty much all the Thundercats action figures. Had Mumm-Ra, had most of the super mutants. So yeah, I had the Thunder Tank. So yeah. Hey, I was a dedicated Thundercats fan. So yeah, so no, this is one of my shows. My wife makes fun of me, call me a nerd because you can never talk about Thundercats without doing the Mumm-Ra intro. So
well, you know what?
What?
Listen, man, I always tell Sigma and you guys and SKC, I said, listen, I learned from you. I learned from you guys, from you younger guys, your perspectives, from a different, a few years after me. So I'm here to learn and see how this conversation goes.
believe it or not, man, I know I talk about the '90s uh, often, but I'm actually a really huge fan of the animated shows from the '80s. In my honest opinion, I think the '80s had the most influential animated shows. Now, there's a handful of animated shows from the '90s that I would say that were up there with a lot of the animated shows from the '80s. But as a whole, I think the height of animation in the US was really in the '80s. So you had Robotech, you had everybody remembers Transformers Generation One, Generation Two. You had the GoBots. Obviously you had the Silver Hulks. You had what was it G Force? I believe G Force. Um,
That was the '70s. That was my younger
yeah,
days.
they were still playing those reruns. they were playing, they were
Cartoon
playing those
Network. God
reruns well
bless it.
into the
Yeah.
'90s for the G-Force. I remember those guys. But yeah, so a lot of those Hanna-Barbera shows from the '70s and even the early '80s. Yeah, they were playing those. Man, they were playing a lot of those well into the early 2000s. So I was a big fan of a lot of the shows from the '80s. So yeah, I would
So
say that much.
definitely for the next State of Melt Entertainment, we'll definitely bring that up. Talk about the animations of '80s versus '90s. Definitely a great topic to break up, Doc. But
Yeah, you know why? Because the thing about it, the major difference is that you really didn't have the censorship that started to take place in the latter the latter 90s, the mid to latter 90s. So that's part of the reason why sort of the X-Men show fell out of favor, X-Men 97. You anyone remember the Gargoyles from the 90s? You know, those were
Yeah.
some of
mhm.
those really early shows from the early mid '90s. A lot of those shows fell out of favor because of the censorship that took place, and then everybody knows all the garbage we got in the 2000s. So
It's funny you mentioned gargoyles, and I'll be really quick because we really got to get the show started. But gargoyles faced a huge backlash from a certain segment of concerned parents and mothers, and they were the reason why gargoyles had the plug pulled early. But with that said, we can circle back to that. So, Sigma, let's get the show on the road.
yes, sir.
Yep. Thank you both, gents. So, like I said before, the stream is about Mumm-Ra, and for the newcomers out there that are not familiar with Mumm-Ra or the Thundercats, this particular clip pretty much summarized what Mumm-Ra is famous for. So, fair use, but here we go.
Ancient spirits of evil, transform this decayed form to Mumm-Ra, the ever-living!
And there you go. So yeah, that's what Mumm-Ra is very famous for when it comes to the Thundercats. So with that said, let's kind of go around circle in regards of what was our interpretation of Thundercats and even Mumm-Ra at that. So Aizasama, I'll start with you first. What was Thundercats for you growing up?
Okay, I was pretty young whenever it came out. I mean, I was actually, I was still a baby when it came out. I was born in '83,
Hmm.
um, but I did get to see reruns and stuff. But it was, you know, I don't think initially early on they really had given him much, but I think it was much later in the secondary canon where they gave him, kind of a backstory. And now, I know Logic will have to kind of polish this up, but I know from what I remember early on, they did not give him much of a backstory or anything like that. So it was kind of a mystery to why he was what he was. But we all know about the ancient spirits, those four statues there, which is the Black Pyramid that he's in. They can't leave outside of there, so they use him as their will, the embodiment of their will to go outside of the sarcophagus, outside the Black Pyramid, and basically take over all of Thundera, which is the goal. And in secondary canon, they had it to where he was once known as Wonka, and he was a member of Pharaoh's council, and but the problem was that even though he had a friendship with the Pharaoh, uh, so they thought. His aim was to overthrow them, to basically rule the land for himself. So he chose to go to the Black Pyramid and invoke aid of the ancient evil spirits to give him power in doing so, and that's how he ended up becoming uh, Mumm-Ra. So I don't think there's ever been really much anything good about him. I think in everything you see, he is pretty much, just evil. Even though I think there have been maybe a few minor moments where he's shown some decent qualities about himself. But that's all I pretty much remember about him.
Yeah, and that's staying with me too, Aizawa. That's why it's like I'll have to admit, like I was sharing on the back end. This is one character where I had a hard time finding like character development information on him. Like, what was his thought process? What was his belief and everything? Now, as somebody who's much younger, like yourself, where yeah, I mainly caught like the reruns and everything. maybe there's some who have studied more background into Mumm-Ra. They could give us some more insight. So with that said, then I will pass it on to one of our older gentlemen here on the panel, and that's Mr. Logic Finest. What's your interpretation of Thundercats and even Mom?
Well, you know, Thundercats first run. I was in school, so for me, it was an interesting time. There were a lot of cartoons coming out in the mid '80s. So specifically, Thundercats was visually it seemed different, and the story was different. So the Thundercats they escape Thundera, they come to Earth, and then while they're there, they're enemies. If memory serves correct me if I'm wrong. Some evil mutants they follow them to Earth. So you know, similar story in some respects to Gen 1 Transformers. But you had the additional of Mumm-Ra. Now, from my memory recalls, I don't recall a backstory on Mumm-Ra. I don't. Maybe there was. I don't. I don't recall it. Um, at the time, he seemed to me to just be another stereotypical evil villain, zero redeeming qualities. Again, I don't recall his backstory. If there is one, I was kind of looking looking to see if maybe you guys had researched it because after after season two, I personally started to lose a bit of interest in the show. But I was always hoping that there would be some sort of character development and backstory to Mumm-Ra, which again I don't recall offhand. So not very helpful. But as I said, I was mostly here to hopefully learn from you gents and see if there is any actual further depth to Mumm-Ra.
All right, all right. Well, we'll definitely find out. Dr. Phoenix, as you rightfully stated, you have grown up being a fan of Thundercats and Mumm-Ra. What has been your interpretation of this series?
Well, again, as we were speaking in the background, like many of the '80s, many of those shows, animated shows of the '80s, came along a little bit before I was born. But again, I caught the reruns, and so Mumm-Ra, they did kind of go into his backstory in the second season, as Simon stated earlier. But also too, there were some Thundercat comics and crossovers. So there was crossovers with He-Man, Masters of the Universe. There was crossover with Superman, I believe, as well. But there was a limited edition run. I want to say it was in the early maybe mid 2000s that went into the backstory of Mumm-Ra. And basically, as Eisenhower has said, he was a member of the Pharaoh's Council. He actually he actually buried one of the Pharaoh's sons, and he did it in such a way that honored the son, and so he became a favorite of the of the Pharaoh. However, he had always aspired to overthrow the Pharaoh and eventually rule the kingdom, but he never had the power. So it was only by happen chance he came upon the statue that led him to the force ancient spirits of evil that eventually his powers mimic that of I don't know if we have him on the villain of the month, but his powers are very similar to that of, well, at least the way they manifest is very similar to that of Juggernaut, where he basically becomes this avatar of these spirits, very much like Juggernaut becomes the avatar of the being of the fifth dimensional being Sidorak. And so basically they bestow a portion of their power onto him, and and so he becomes their will. He acts on their will. He becomes their will because obviously they can't leave outside the Black Pyramid, but he can. And so he's basically the embodiment of all evil within the Thundercats universe. And so so that's about as much as I could really remember off the top of my head about Mumm-Ra. But as a whole, initially when the show began, the Thundercats were actually running from they left them there and they were running from the mutants. And it was only after they had got onto Third Earth that the mutants discovered the Black Pyramid and later discovered Mumm-Ra being in there. So originally the mutants were the original antagonists, and then Mumm-Ra kind of came along a few episodes later at the beginning of the first season. So that's probably that's what I do remember off the top of my head. So
Right on, right on. That's very interesting. Far as like his background information of being part of Pharaoh's household and kind of cozying up with the Pharaoh, but he already had bad intentions of he wanted to take his spot and everything, and he had to go through other means to gain power. So that definitely makes sense. So what I found so far, and shout out to Isaac Sama, really the only information we kind of have in regards to somewhat his personality and even more details into his background. We were able to pull up something from Thundercats Wikipedia. And so this is where I feel like this would be a good starter point to kind of talk about what uh what Mumm-Ra was all about, and maybe find some means of talking as to why he went about things the way he did. So this article states that unable to accept death, Mumm-Ra turned to the ancient spirits of evil for a way to live forever. Mumm-Ra is seen in the series as pure evil, but not without compassion, at least for his pet Mammut. He is now a sadistic, scheming, cunning, ruthless, callous, and remorseless character who always seems able to anticipate betrayal from the mutants and is therefore not hesitant to do the same. He is utterly determined to rid Third Earth of the Thundercats, seeing them as the only threat to his power over Third Earth, and is a Machiavellian plotter, even using the all powerful lunatics of Plundar, who are perfectly happy to betray Mumm-Ra to help him in his plans. Because of his servitude to the evil spirits who granted him immortality, he also pursues a means of spreading their dark influence throughout Third Earth. Mumm-Ra only has one weakness: his own hideous reflection, which neutralizes his ability to remain outside of the Black Pyramid and forces him to withdraw back to the Black Pyramid in his emaciated mummy form. However, as the second season began, the evil spirits eventually overcame this problem to help Mumm-Ra become even more formidable than before. As shown from the various guises he has throughout the show, he is a master of deception. So, I think a good starting point, and Isasama and Dr. Phoenix, you kind of mentioned it beforehand. I guess a good starting point would be talking about, I guess, his purpose of now taking over a third Earth and the fact that he he see the Thundercats as his only threat to really take it over true power, which anybody in power would definitely want to get rid of any threat that opposes them in that form. But in this case, I guess we could just start off with how, I guess, your interpretation of what Mumm-Ra was thinking in regards to now he got this newfound power and why he feels that the Thundercats are his main threat to taking over the entire planet.
yeah, so really quickly, despite there being somewhat limited information on him, the reason why this character is one of the characters of the villains of the month is because for that very intro you played, this is one of the most iconic bad guy intros of all time. Like it doesn't get any more iconic than that. than that line that Mumm-Ra speaks about ancient spirits of evil, whatever. But I will say he wanted to rule Third Earth, but specifically he was after the Eye of Thundera, which everyone knows that was in the Sword of Omens. But part of the reason he was after the Eye of Thundera is because he wanted to use it to help him rid himself of his dependence to the ancient spirits of evil. Because the Eye of Thundera is considered all powerful. It was one of the it is the perhaps the most powerful relic in all of Third Earth and the universe for that matter. So, but again, his motivation was one to spread evil and to spread the influence of the spirits, but two, he had the own personal motivation of ridding himself his dependence on the spirits of evil by obtaining the Eye of Thundera. So, just to put that in perspective.
Interesting indeed. And we'll definitely circle back to that. But we are joined by A Tourism, and definitely I gotta play his intro.
What you gonna do? 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 What you gonna do?
Mr. A Tourism, how's it going, sir?
Ancient spirits of Kuning, transform this decayed form to Kun-Ra, the ever Kuning.
And that's one of the reasons why I invited you up here because I know
That was
Mumm-Ra is
beautiful.
yeah, that's one of your favorites too.
Oh boy, yeah, man. But, yeah, thank you for having this on, bro. Ham. I had to shut down a panel earlier. You'll see in the Telegram. Anyway, yeah. So Mumm-Ra, the ever living. I find it interesting about him in this particular thing. I don't know if anyone has ever. Probably everybody has seen this. You've probably seen Ancient Aliens. I'm assuming, correct? Like probably Logic's Finest, probably as Ensemble, probably you too, Sigma, and also Doc Finish. Nice to meet you, by the way. I think that's the first time I actually got a panel with you.
Oh, pleasure. Yeah, I think it is. Yes, pleasure.
So, Ancient Aliens always had this weird connection. It always was talking about how many different civilizations on planet Earth were all connected, probably in some ancient past, to aliens, i.e., the Egyptians, the Mayans, the ancient Khmer Empire. All of these particular disparate civilizations all built temples and pyramids, more or less pretty much in the same fashion, more or less. So I think it's interesting that on Third Earth, which is what they said, which is what Mumm-Ra said was the first Earth, which is a very interesting kind of temporal thing, but we'll go back to that. I find it interesting that on a planet that possibly is not quite Earth, still has a temple pyramid that looks just like an ancient Egyptian pyramid on this. So I find it interesting that they kind of, when they built this, they kind of had this same kind of, I guess, I don't know if they were influenced by that or they were thinking about that, but I find it interesting that they kind of made that connection, or at least I'm seeing a connection between that and what we see here from Ancient Aliens in terms of the pyramid theory with all the different civilizations that had at that particular point in time. That's it. I just wanted to bring that up.
You know that that's a very interesting point because one episode amongst others that really sticks out to me.
Mm-hmm.
There was a criminal that comes to third Earth. See, at the time, I always thought it was called Third Earth because it's the third rock from the sun. But
Mm-hmm.
this one episode, there was a criminal who came to Earth, and the criminal was pursued by an intergalactic police officer. And at the very end, she used this special weapon against this slime monster. And at the end of the episode, she tells Lionel it's from an ancient it's from an ancient concoction found on some other planet. It's called soap. Now
Yeah.
the reason why, yeah, I personally always liked that episode. To me, that for whatever reason, that was one of my favorites. What's sticking into my head and why that's coming to the forefront now is I noticed the very same thing in that every ancient society always has pyramids. The Egyptians did it first, but all the ancient societies, they all have pyramids. And I've noticed that there is a recurring theme amongst animation and sci-fi to when they want to go someplace totally abstract. Boom, throw in pyramids.
Yep.
I have a few theories why, but yeah, that's a very interesting point.
My dad had a. I didn't want to. Was anyone's going to go? I didn't want to stop anyone else.
You can go right ahead.
No, you know what? Because what I mean, I don't know if you still want to continue on that thread, but I didn't want to interrupt what you was thinking.
You know, Adrian, because we were just talking about how you know the the bad thing about Mumm-Ra is for a character that has an
Mm.
iconic line that make it so famous and
Yeah.
everything, he doesn't have much character development. Like there's some information of what he did in the past, like
Yeah.
Dr. Figures mentioned, if you read the comic section and all, it goes into a little bit more details about, what he was doing in the past before he became Mumm-Ra. But
Mm.
outside of that, throughout the whole series, there really wasn't much character development to kind of really expand on his thinking, his philosophies, and everything.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those times where I guess we could kind of freestyle to talk about, I guess you would say, our interpretation
Mm.
of his philosophies, his thinking, his beliefs, just based on the episodes we saw.
Mm.
But yeah, if it does lead to where talk about other elements of the show with it, that's still great as well.
Okay.
Just really quickly, you know, you know, Mum-Ra was just like most other villains, and as with most other animated shows of the 80s, they were really designed to really sell a toy line. So most of the animated shows of the 80s, they had an accompanying toy line. So that was the major purpose behind them, whether it was GI. Probably the show that kicked all that off was probably GI Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've always had, so that was always really one of those underlying things going on whenever you saw these shows. But again, Mum-Ra was also characteristic of the 80s, where he was a villain that had an iconic line that to this day people know it. When they hear it, they know who the character is, what the line reference, who they're referring to. So, he's basically a character that's really famous for one really iconic line, because again, unless you were a hardcore fan and you managed, you can get your hands on the comics, which are really difficult to get your hands on without paying some really exorbitant amounts of money.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna need to watch the episodes. Like I know you can watch the episodes on Hulu.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can watch it on Hulu, maybe Amazon Prime Video. But the point is that he's like most other villains of animated shows of the 80s, where whether it was Cobra Commander or whomever, they had these iconic lines that everyone just repeated, and they became these memes. And so yeah, these were characters that were famous for having iconic lines. So
Yeah, they were PR. I
yeah.
think it's interesting. I think it's interesting that the Eye of Thundera was so well known that he knew about it all the way on Third Earth. Because think about it, they took a generational ship from Thundera, right, to get
Yes.
there. So it's crazy because I don't think the Thunderian, I'm not gonna say the Thundercat, the Thunderian civilization had not spread up that far yet. So it's
Well, yeah,
not.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, they had to leave, but keep in mind
Yeah.
that Lionel, for example, he was a kid when they left him there. So by the
Correct.
time the show began, he was an adult, but he still had the mind of a
Of a boy.
child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I said, but that was the generation ship that they took to get there. So I don't know how long Jaga lived until he died, until they got there, because he was the one that sat out the ship. They went there for a while, then he sat in the ship and he got it, and then he died, and then somewhere, I guess would give it maybe about a year to 5 years, something like that. They found Third Earth, and then things got a little rocky after that point, and then we know everything spirals from there. So we have to understand, or at least have to at least maybe think about it, that it was at least several thousands of light years separating between Thundera and Third Earth. So now I'm curious as to how he did it, because how he found out about it, because at least in the beginning of the show, it just showed he was just asleep and then he woke up.
But going back to the episode that we were talking about a few minutes ago with that interstellar police officer, and
Uh-huh.
if you remember,
Uh-huh.
Thundera was the
Yeah.
capital of an empire. It
Yes.
wasn't just the planet of Thundera.
Uh-huh.
That was the capital planet of their empire.
Uh-huh.
So they had interstellar travel.
Oh
So
yes, I know that.
they were part of a larger galactic community, as it were, other planets, other civilizations who also
Mm,
had intergalactic travel. So
mm,
throughout the course of time, whether
mm,
it be centuries, whether it be millennia, the the eye, the legend of the Eye of Thundera clearly has spread throughout the galaxy.
mm.
And also, oh, my bad.
No,
Go
no, no.
No.
ahead.
Go
Yeah.
go ahead, Isaac, because
Go
I'm
right
I,
going
ahead.
after you.
I was gonna say that also. Originally, I believe that Mumm-Ra was after the star of Thundera, which it was an actual a planet or a star that it ended up creating a talisman to manifest all of its power. But um, Mumm-Ra couldn't actually wield it, so it
Hmm.
ended up blowing itself. It ended up causing an explosion and destroying itself, um, which that's whenever he became fixated on the Eye of Thunder, I believe. After that, but the thing that stuck out the most about me uh, was the fact that he left servitude of a pharaoh to be in servitude to evil spirits. So just think about
Oh,
that for a
okay.
But,
moment.
All right.
but no, hold that thought because I want to talk on that too. But we are joined on the panel by our good friend JJ Wilson. So I gotta play his particular intro.
I'm not going there to die. I'm going to find out if I'm really alive.
That is a cool intro.
Well, shout out to JJ for that inspiration. How's it going, good sir?
Ah, man, thank you for having me. How's everybody doing?
Good,
No,
good.
Good,
Hey,
good,
good.
good.
Glad to
thank you,
have you.
bro.
So before we continue, JJ, I know you talk about how you're also a fan of Mumm-Ra. What's been your interpretation of him?
Oh yeah, I'm just a fan of the show overall. I mean, it's been years since I've watched it. The episodes I remember was like the remake version. Now yeah, with Mumm-Ra, man, this guy, he's a character, man. Like
Hmm.
I think some of my best memories of him, that was him just like having his battles with Lion-O or the rest of the Thundercats. It's just him roasting his own henchmen, the mutants. Like every time he did something bad, like he would say something real sarcastic and snarky at him. I remember those times as a kid. I was just shaking my head like, man, this guy has no chill.
He
And
was.
yeah.
That's true, JJ, and it actually kind of ties in with what Isaac Sabo just mentioned beforehand. Now, I too find it interesting if we include his background information where he once served under Pharaoh. I find it interesting that he goes from serving a Pharaoh who, thought very highly of him, thought that, he was a good friend and everything, to now serving under the four ancient spirits of evil, whom without them, he has no power.
Can I answer that with a question?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
okay, we've looked at in this Villain of the Month series, we've looked at Megatron, Vader, um, Magneto, Lex Luthor. So, my question to you, gentlemen, when it comes to Mumm-Ra, in relation to the other villains who we agree or disagree with their mindset, their philosophies, their ideals, and their goals, what actually is Mumm-Ra's mindset? What is his end game? Like, what is his ultimate purpose? Why is he doing this? Is it just simply,
Yeah,
okay, I just want, okay, you know what, go, choose him, go right ahead.
I was gonna say, can I just answer that with a song?
Go
I
ahead.
wanna be free like the bluebirds in the morning. From the Monkeys. I think he wants to be. I think he wants to. I think the reason why he served under Pharaoh, but then he went from the spirits of evil because he wanted to be more superior than the Pharaoh or break free from of his, I guess, loyalty or bond to the Pharaoh. So I think, and I believe, I don't know if it was you, Logic's finest, or Doc Phoenix that brought up the other part that he wanted the Eye of Thundera so he could have the power to break free of the spirits of evil, so not be dependent on them, so that he can be his own. I guess I want to say his own spirit of evil. But no, he wanted to be his own master, so not to be dependent on anyone.
But here's the funny part.
Yeah.
Because of all the other villains we named before,
Mm.
they're actually capable of making everything. They're actually capable of doing that.
Yeah, you're
He's
right.
not.
He's not.
Um
And that's where I was headed, Eisen, because I don't see what's Mumra's end game. What's his path to victory, and what's his end game, and what is it in this new reality that he's actually what is his reality that he's seeking to create? Because so far I'm not seeing any of those three things. So maybe you gentlemen can help me out with that.
I would just say, in general, he was a character that pretty much lied in wait and waited for his opportunity to ascertain power. Because again, his ultimate goal was to eventually break free of the ancient spirits of evil, which kind of the fact that he went from being
Oh wow. Dang.
that is
SKC,
funny, man. That's funny.
SKC, you can't be saying Dago stuff like that, and then you get on my panel, you be trying to come over here and trying to be not now, brother,
Hey,
mercy,
hey,
mercy,
Please,
and Mumra got some max
mercy.
skills though, especially in the
oh,
second series.
but
no,
I can't even
it's
lie.
just the very fact he went from serving one master to serving four masters kind of puts a whole new spin on the age old adage that you can't serve more than one master. But I want to
mm,
say this much about the entire story arc of not just Mumm-Ra and him wanting the Eye of Thunder, but Thundercats in general. Um, as Eisen and Logic's Finance were speaking earlier, Thundera was the capital of a much larger empire. And if anyone that's fans of Marvel comics and specifically the X-Men, you know that the
The
Thundercats, their
Shi'ar,
story arc mimics what other intergalactic kingdom, the
the
Shi'ar
Shi'ar,
Empire.
yeah.
Yes.
Bingo.
Yes, and so again, like the Shi'ar didn't have the Eye of Thundera, they had the Imkron crystal, which can reshape all of reality. Again,
Uh-oh.
this was the whole, this is what spawned the whole Phoenix saga.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you even Apocalypse at one time was after the Imkron crystal. Anyone who remembers the Age of Apocalypse series from the 90s knows that the only way they were able to reset the timeline was by was Gambit and the Gambit, and I believe his group was the Externals. I believe they had to go they had to go with Colossus' sister. Um, I think her name was, I can't remember her name now. Ileana Rasputin. They had to go with her to the Shi'ar Empire to get the Imkron crystal so they can reset the reality and bring reality back to what it should have been before Legion killed Professor X. And basically, the world got split between humans and Apocalypse. But the point is that the Thundercats, their empire mimics their story of their empire, very much mimics that of the Shi'ar Empire. And at the heart of their power was the Imkon crystal for the Shi'ar Empire, and for the Thundercats, it was the Eye of Thundera. It was this all power and all knowing. But again, Mumm-Ra really didn't have he didn't have an immediate goal. His goal was more or less, I'll just wait and bide my time until the opportunity presents itself, excuse me, and he will use that opportunity to get what he wanted.
He actually had a line where he said this, and there will be another time. He actually said that. He actually said that. So
Yes.
you're right, Doc. You're right.
Dark Phoenix. Quick segue, gents. You brought up Legion. There was a brilliant television show that was on FX called
Yeah, I remember that
Legion.
show.
That show was absolutely bananas. I'm surprised that show was on American television for more than one season because it was such a mind bender. The writing was brilliant, the acting was brilliant, the casting was brilliant. If you haven't gotten a chance to check out the show Legion, you owe it to yourself. That show is bananas. It's awesome.
Anybody remembers Mumm-Ra?
No.
Oh, I saw a clip of that earlier today. They were fighting against each other at first, and then
Yep.
he had mind controlled her.
Yeah, man.
She was
I think she was the only.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah, Mumm-Ra had the pimp hand. He had the magical pimp hand on that
exactly.
broad. Brought her right under,
Oh my
brought her right to
goodness.
heel. He let.
And altruism. If you remember if you remember the 2011 the remake, he had used Pumira to
Yes.
Lionel.
You know what? I didn't even, for some reason or other, I tried to watch that series and I just could not. It just,
You couldn't do it.
I couldn't. I don't know why. Well, now I do know why. It didn't seem.
Yeah,
It
they
didn't
changed some
capture the
things up.
magic. It's worth watching, but it didn't quite capture that magic of
Yeah.
the 80s series because
Yeah.
they kind of completely changed a lot of the backstories. Like,
Yeah.
Tiger became actually the brother of Lionel.
Yeah.
He wasn't a member. He wasn't just this member of a noble family, but he became the actual adopted brother of Lionel until they had Lionel. He was the prince, and then they had Jaga and his wife had Lionel, and then eventually Lionel became the favorite child, and Tiger kind of took a backseat and became more of this military guy. So
Yeah.
it was an interesting show. It's very much interesting take. I think it's still worth watching, but yeah, it doesn't quite capture the magic of the 80s.
You know the crazy
series.
thing about it? The guy that played the voice of Lionel in the original series was actually the voice of the father.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of those voice actors that play some of those iconic voices, whether it was Megatron, Optimus Prime, Cobra Commander, they, even Yoda, a lot of them had double duty playing a number of different animated characters. So
Can I ask a question? I want to ask a question. Do you think it would have been better had they had continued, or maybe done, a delineation of from a certain time in the past say after the events of the first series? Do you think there probably would have been a better series because at that point they can kind of, I guess, like do like Easter eggs from the past series. They can do references back to the old series, stuff like that. Do you think they're probably put like this? I think it's better. Will be better because they can re-merchandise stuff. They can do a whole lot of that. But
Well, we'll
do you
see.
think it would be better?
Well, truism, there is a cultural thing happening there with that show. When
Yeah.
Thundercats came out, it
Mm-hmm.
was '84. So
Correct.
the world, the the world that the show existed in when it was created is a
Mm,
completely different world from
mm,
2011 when the remake came out.
mm,
So the remake of 2011 mirrors the current cultural zeitgeist, that
ah,
being of um, people's interpersonal skills
mm,
are nowhere as developed as they were back in the 80s. So
mm,
the sarcasm, the snarky comments, the abrasiveness, the being a wise ass, that is the world that the remake was created in. So
mm.
both shows mirrored the cultural zeitgeist in which they were created. So you know, for us, that remake show is not for us because our sensibilities are different and they're changed versus the current cultural zeitgeist.
Can I
If
ask
I'm
you a
if I'm
question
so
then?
clear,
Can I
yes,
ask you a question then? Because seems
please.
how more there were more of us, um, the people who probably would have appealed to more people in our generation who actually lived to see the first original series. Do you think it would have been more successful than the remake that they made had they had tailored it the way I described?
Well, see, the thing is this, right? Who is the target audience for the original show in '84, and who's the target audience for the show in 2011? See, because
Mm,
just because it's animation, look at
mm,
Invincible. That's animation, but that
mm.
target audience is clearly not children and young teens. That's for
Okay,
adults.
okay, I
And
see
Now,
what you're saying.
yeah, more hardcore comic fans.
Yeah, I would argue that most of the animated shows of the 80s very much tend to have more mature themes to it, and so it
Yeah.
tend to target an older audience.
Mm,
You know, again, these are shows that they could never exist in today's world.
I don't
okay.
know. I don't know. I think, I mean, when you really think about it, those from the 80s, I don't really think that it was for that much of an older audience, to be honest. Um, I mean, I mean, the audience may seem it because they're older now, but I don't think then it was intended for that.
Well,
Um,
I think part of the problem is that you're dealing with an audience that was more mature then, you know,
Exactly, and
to
yeah,
kind of
I
that's
go
would.
along with
and
what
that comes
I,
back
to
to
go
to
along
the
with
point that I
what
keep trying
yeah,
to make about the
yeah,
the cultural zeitgeist in
yeah,
'84 is different than the cultural zeitgeist now. So
yeah.
Maybe the
for
key
right.
word,
for
maybe
the
the key word is
children, the
sensitivity.
teens, and the adults, again, it's a different world. It's a different cultural zeitgeist. If the '84 show in that form were to be made now, it could be made now, but it would have to be a type of show like Invincible, which is more
Mm,
for adults. Because for the younger generation, and again, it's not a shot or an attack, but the younger generation, the current cultural zeitgeist is more towards being abrasive, and the snarkiness and the sarcasm and the insults and the interpersonal interaction skills are nowhere near as developed, and it's just a more abrasiveness. So it would have to be for a slightly different audience. Is my point.
Y- I would say this too to kind of piggyback off of what you're saying, Logic. A 12-year-old that's from the 80s and even early 90s is going to look at things very differently compared to a 12-year-old today.
yeah,
oh
Like
yeah.
most
that
definitely.
that to me that's why
It's across
like
every area.
yeah, yeah. But what I was getting at is, this is why a show like Thundercats and Mumm-Ra, even just watching the reruns back in the day, it was like, yeah, I don't see anything offensive about this. The characters, for the most part, are something I can relate to, seem pretty cool and everything. But a 12-year-old today, they look at
Chitara was
Thundercats,
life.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they will look at Thundercats today, and they will probably be put off by the language and the talk and whatnot, because again, they're not used to hearing those type of patterns of talks and language like we are used to hearing. So that's one aspect of it. But SKC brought up a good question.
It is.
And he says, if you could, how would any of us have improved the character Mumm-Ra from the series? So I'm actually going to work backwards. So, JJ, seeing SKC's questions, how would you go about it?
Oh, that's easy. Get rid of his weakness of him not being able to touch the Sword of Thundera. That's a start. But I think they did minimize that later in the series somehow. My memory is vague at that point because it's been so long since I watched the Thundercat series. But yeah, that's one way to look about it. And improve his max skills because he could have had a whole army full of female servants if he wanted to, just to be funny. So yeah.
He goes from Mumm-Ra to Pipra, huh?
Actually, Atruism, that's the wrong clip I should have played. I actually should have played this. Extra. Right. So, Atruism, now I'll pass it over to you as far as SKC's question.
Okay. So, I'm thinking about it. I would think that for him, well, we got to understand all these particular bad guys and everything will basically just something that the good guys can fight against so they can have their vehicles, their toys, and superpowers and everything. This is basically what's all one great big TV commercial for the toys. But if we were going to make Mumm-Ra a much better villain, I personally would probably have him not be quite so confrontational and out there just yet. I wouldn't bring him out immediately in the first episode or even in the third, fourth, fifth. I would leave him in something kind of like maybe a Palpatine figure, more or less, where he's kind of controlling things subtly from the background, where he's trying to he maybe even he comes in and he seems like more of like a benefactor to the Thundercats, and he's helping them and things of this nature, but he's not quite there, not quite near enough that the Iron Thundera can like detect his evil, but kind of close enough where he's trusted somewhat, or the people who the Thundercats trust him. So something like that. So he can kind of like work his tentacles, as it were, in a sphere of influence, kind of an insidious kind of like a little trap where he can kind of come at them through slight, indirect, but still powerful ways where they can affect their psyche.
So in other words, Atruism, you would actually make him more calculating.
Yes, definitely more calculating.
Definitely a character where you could probably say, using that type of thinking, he would try to find a way to maybe even gain his own powers without even needing the ancient spirits.
Correct. He could. You could say, let's say like this, right? Like we have the Amazon women right there. We'll go right to JJ right there. We have the Amazon women right there. He can slowly but surely start having an effect over the queen of the Amazons, slowly wooing them over slowly, surely. And because they're women and I know as a young man, they probably, a couple of them were checking them out. I know a couple of them, but the youngest one I thought was the cutest. I forget what her name was. She was like the youngest, shortest Amazon. For some reason, I had a thing for her when I was a kid. Anyway.
Extra.
probably have an episode where he gains some kind of control over her and uses her to try to entice Lionel to like that's what I'm talking about. He could like use different kinds of people to entice them to do different kinds of things to try to get the sword away from Lionel, or put him in different kind of situations where he manipulates other forces around them to be able to get the sword from them. And then say he can do like Thanos did, kind of like through the whole MCU thing, where when finally he said, well, fine, I'll do it myself. And that's when you have the whole end game thing. You could have done that with him. He could have just been a shadowy puppeteer of bringing all these particular external forces, not getting involved himself directly, but controlling all of them to cause them all this kind of. And I think the show probably could have been a lot better in regards to that they did that. But that's just me.
Okay,
Brilliant.
fair enough. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Kind of give me some ideas myself. So, Dr. Phoenix, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll make mine really quick. Essentially, for me, I would have liked to see them delve more into what his true motivations, ambitions were, which was ultimately to get the Eye of Thundera to, so he would no longer be reliant on the ancient spirit of evil for their power. So I would have liked to have seen, because every time, every episode he was in, you always see him whenever ultimately he loses to the Thundercats. He always has this. They always show this little scene where he's talking. He's talking to that bowling brew, whatever it was. He's talking to
Mama,
himself. Yes, he's having that conversation, and he's speaking of, well, there'll be a next time, this will happen, this will not happen. And I would like to have seen where he's having those conversations where it just kind of slowly but surely he's talking more about what his true motivations were. And so that would kind of go along with what truism was just stating too, where not only was he just kind of wielding power from the background, just being this puppeteer, if you will, but also he, through his own conversations with himself, he's slowly revealing more about what his true motivations were.
hmm, hmm.
Excellent, excellent. So, SKC, we're going to come to you, but let me just get our last two panelists to give their thoughts, and then we will touch up on you, sir. So, Logic Finest, same question, your thoughts.
Well, we've explored a recurring theme with the several villains of the month that we've looked at, in that these villains are a reflection of the hero, and the hero in himself finds many similarities, his dark side, as it were, in his villain, and that the villain, the hero, is always fighting to not become the thing that he hates the most, which is this villain, but he so easily can because he shares many similarities. Now, I asked the question, what is Mumm-Ra's endgame? What is his path to achieve his end goal? And what is his endgame? What is the new world that he's seeking to create? What is the reality that he wants people to live under? I don't see any of those things in Mumm-Ra. So those are things that I would have given him. I would have given him a world that he wants to create, a world that he wants people to live under, a end game, a new path that he wants to forge for everyone, that he thinks, listen, this is the world that I want to bring about. This is the world that you are all going to live under, and this is the path. These are the means to achieve my ends, and these are the reasons why. Whether that you are sheep and you can't see what I see, but you should know who I am. My thing is always, the more intricate and complex and more thoughtful the subject matter is, I am all over it. So that's what I would have done.
Hmm. All right, very good thoughts.
Hmm.
Isasama,
Nice.
you got the floor.
Yeah. I'm kind of gonna go off of logics here, and because this was not supposed to be a well thought out cartoon. It was just supposed to be fun for kids to enjoy and sell toys.
Facts.
Um, which is
Facts.
why I know you posed a question you did about how he differs from all the other villains. Um, he simply different in the fact that he had no potential to actually be the guy whatsoever. So the only thing you could do is to not have a backstory and just keep it as simple as as it was supposed to be. He's supposed to end up being a jest at the end of every episode.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
No, yeah, wait, come on, we can't do that, Atrius. Let's be real. There is nothing intricate about Mumm-Ra. Nothing whatsoever.
Oh man.
I'm not hating on him. It's just it is what it is. There's nothing complex
You're right, bro.
about the Thundercats.
I can't be mad about that. You're right. You're right. You're right.
Bro,
I have a quick
I'm
question.
going there.
So I have a quick question. So what you're telling me is, Eisen, that Mumm-Ra basically is like Grand Regent Thrag from Invincible. He's literally the most powerful Viltrumite. He is their leader. He's the regent, but he is a shallow character. There's no intricacy. There's nothing to him. He just happens to be the most powerful, and he has given up the search to find the heir of the true king of Viltrum because he
I
just
wouldn't
wants
go
to
that
become
far.
power himself.
I wouldn't go that far because he's not the most powerful. The ancient even spurs are.
Wait. What? Come again?
Yes, those 4 statues that give him power, they are more powerful.
Okay.
If he had the ability
Well,
to
Yeah, 'cause
wield the
we're-
power of the Star of Thundera, it would be different. He doesn't have that potential.
Right, because
I mean,
without those spirits, he really doesn't have anything else going for him.
gotcha.
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
he was
Yeah.
ultimately, he like I said, his powers were he was ultimately an avatar for the spirits. Very
Yes.
much like I referenced how his his powers manifest very much the way that Juggernaut's powers manifest, where Juggernaut was Cain Marco was the avatar for the Sidorak, for Sidorak.
All right,
So,
so go ahead, Doc. If you still got more.
no, I'm good. I know you need to get to SKC, so
Yes.
please.
Yeah. So before I introduce SKC, everybody knows his intro.
The cackle that starts wars.
Yeah, man.
Yes, indeed. Mr. SKC, sir. The floor is yours. How's it going?
Hey, what's going on? What's going on? Yeah, I don't know. I like doing little experiments like that, particularly with characters and even in this villains where that have significant flaws. And I understand that the as everyone stated, the whole point was just to sell toys and all of that. But I don't know. I think if I was to redo it, um, I like that idea. I didn't see the series, but you guys were talking about there was a 2011 series and where Tigra was his like brother / relative or something like that.
Adoptive brother, yeah.
Adopted brother, Tigra, Lionel's parents adopted him first because he was older than Lionel, but then by the time they actually had Lionel as a baby, that's when Tigra got put to the side. So yeah, they were like brothers.
Yeah,
and that even works better for what I was thinking. I probably would have wrote it as Truism was stating, so far as Mumm-Ra being a bit more calculating, and I would have had Mumm-Ra somehow either control or convince Tigra to his side.
Palpatine style?
Not as such. Not as such. I probably would have played with that because during that time, with Star Wars was hot and all that other stuff. But I would have reversed it a little bit in the thought that would have got to a point to where they've had their little back and forth for some time, and of course there's been Lionel trying to convince Tigra to come back and all of that stuff, but eventually And over time, it will let the audience know that Tigra actually knows Mumm-Ra's secrets, and that Mumm-Ra has been basically teaching him what his true intent of things are, and that would probably have been the crescendo of everything. That you have these Thundercats that are trying to do their thing, and then convince Tigra to come back to them, and where you would have this clash of the brother slash half brother type of thing, and the sword, of course, be in the middle of it all, and how they would probably have to clash, because I probably would have threw in a little caveat of where the sword can't be wielded against another Thundercat.
I mean, that was always part of the mythos. You can never use the sword against. You can never use it for evil, and it can never be used against other Thundercats. When Lion attempted to do it in the show, the sword broke.
Mm-hmm. So, and that would probably have been the plan of Mumm-Ra of, hey, I know that they can use it against me, but they can't use it against Tigra.
Yeah, that's interesting. You
I
point
like
that
that.
out.
I like that because that
Yeah.
is playing the long game, planning it out, playing the long game. Again, the more complex and intricate something is, the more I'm all over it, which is why I said that's what I would have done with Mumm-Ra. So again, I said, here is the template that I would have given him, and SKC said, okay, great. Here's what I would have put in that template. I like it.
You know,
Yes.
my what SKC mentioned, I only got one thing to say about that. Um, I would tell you to play this, but you probably get a copyright strike. I would just say play Duel of the Fates. So anybody that is Star Wars fans,
The
no,
ultimate thing of it all, that I would think about if I wanted to like play off of the Star Wars thing, I would have it to where um, Tigra convinces Mumm-Ra that, hey, we actually need to combine.
yeah, because
You
see,
need to,
remember,
y-
Mm,
if you
yeah,
remember
you need to ask your boys to make us all one, and now you're part of me, so the sword can't be used against you.
So I want to ask, and I do apologize. I was getting the kids ready for bed, and I didn't hear the part about Tiger's involvement with Mumm-Ra. Was Tiger going to find out or actually stumble across Mumm-Ra at some point, and therefore they began, like, say, like some kind of a secret communication between the two? Like, say, I don't know if you've seen this movie called this TV series called Black Mass. It was on Netflix.
Yeah, yeah.
You have seen it.
I was thinking not of that site. I was thinking to where um using the 2011 series story a little bit, and stating Mumm-Ra basically using Tigra's ambition against him of, hey, you were the guy, and look how they treat you now.
Oh,
I see what you're
SKC.
saying.
I
yeah,
too was once in that position. We're the same.
that
I
very
get you.
much sounds like the relationship between Emperor Palpatine and Anakin Skywalker.
Exactly.
I,
That's the
I
same way I
would
was saying
I,
it. I was saying the
no,
same thing.
I would say no, not those two, but other Sith apprentices and masters. Just because Palpatine didn't give a shit about Anakin whatsoever, that was the difference between their
I would go
relationship.
But
even deeper
Mumm-Ra
than
didn't care
that.
about anybody neither.
Yeah.
Mumm-Ra was all about his own personal gain. So that's kind of where, for me,
I see. I see
my
what you're saying.
comparison was very much related more towards the Anakin Emperor Palpatine relationship, because again, Anakin was manipulated because he feared losing Padme, because he
Correct.
didn't want to lose Padme like he lost his mother, and so that ultimately put the fear in him that he needed to be more powerful so he could save Padme. But and ultimately, the Emperor saw this guy is truly, if he's truly the chosen one, then he's going to be more powerful than all of us. I can manipulate him to get what I want, and ultimately, again, the end of Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan Kenobi defeats him, pretty much turns him into Darth Vader, and he's a fraction of what he would have been.
But
Now,
that.
Logic, before we continue, because I know JJ he wanted to jump in. JJ, you had some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was listening to SKC's angle when it came to manipulating Tigra for Mumm-Ra's benefit. Now, in the 2011 series, I remember now that he actually manipulated Pumira because he had been watching Lion-O and the Thundercats all that time. And before Pumira came into the picture, there was like a love triangle between Lion-O, Tigra, and Chitara. But Lion-O didn't know at the time that Tigra and Chitara were already a thing until he actually saw them kiss. And then for a while, Lion-O was down and he didn't want to talk to Tigra for a while. And then Pumira shows up. But he didn't know Pumira was being used by Mumm-Ra all that time until like the very end of the series. And that's when he found out that Pumira was using the Thundercats. And I think that's when the series ended, when they got lured into a trap by Mumm-Ra. So I did like SKC's angle of using Tigra as like a conduit for Mumm-Ra to kind of further his ambitions, but he probably could have did the same thing with Pumira in a way. I mean, that's if the series didn't abruptly end, but I just wanted to put that out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the major things that I would have made in that is that Tiger would not have been a just like oh, he's just being controlled type of thing. What I think they would have ultimately came to realize is that no, he has actually become a true believer.
Yeah, I could see that too. Yeah.
What what I
Has
what
anyone
I
ever
was gonna
thought?
say.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh,
So
yeah,
we
Adrian's Logic was going. Go right ahead, Logic.
what I was gonna say is part of what SKC is just describing is a classic writing breakdown in that you have the second son who has been passed over, and the other person who, the quote unquote master manipulator, also wants power, but his path, he has no path to power, so he is going to manipulate the second son, saying that, listen, we're both second sons, or we were both passed over, or you were in this position, but now you no longer are. So these are the things that you have to do to secure your path to power. And again, there are several variations and derivations of that classic theme, but it is a classic theme that works very well across many genres of vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have totally played into the whole Isaac Ishmael twist,
Mhm.
um, and even went so far as to show that Mumm-Ra almost adopts Tigra and even makes sacrifices for him. So it's like, I'm your true family.
Do we all remember The Lion King? Basically,
Yep.
the same exact writing. Like I said, it is a classic writing setup, and it works very well because that's what Scar did with what's
Simba.
Mufasa.
Simba.
and Simba. There you go.
Yes, too.
Again,
Yeah.
there are a few slight variations and derivations, but it is the same classic writing setup. It works very well.
And for a minute, I was thinking more of going towards with the, what is it, the Narnia series, where the White Witch used the younger Pevensey
Edmund?
brother. Yeah, no, Edmund was the oldest, wasn't he?
No, it wasn't Edmund. It
Yeah,
was
Peter
no,
was
it's
the
Peter.
oldest. Yeah,
Peter was
Edmund.
okay, yeah, but yeah,
Mhm.
okay. I couldn't remember. It's been so long, but I have read
Ah,
them and how she used him. But yeah,
But that is the same concept though.
yes, yes.
I was thinking, why not just do like they did in Naruto with Sasuke and Orochimaru, where initially, going with SKC's point, Orochimaru approached Sasuke with the ability to try to get more power to get revenge. But eventually, when it looked like he was getting ready to take over Sasuke, Sasuke actually gained, well, the power that was already in him was greater than Orochimaru. So instead of Mumm-Ra being this kind of like this tutor pseudo uh familiar figure in Tiger's life, he actually is more or less the key to Tiger maybe unleashing something that was already within him, based on, it could be anything. It could be some kind of like how Bengali is like another part of the tiger family. He's a white tiger, but it probably could be like a black tiger. Like say he could have become a darker tiger form that's actually hidden within the tiger family's DNA. So his actual tutelage under Mumm-Ra actually awakens his power, and he becomes an even greater threat than Mumm-Ra himself.
Oh
Man,
yeah, he
true.
could
So
have backstabbed him. Yeah.
what happened if Mumm-Ra taught him how to get a sword that would counter the sword of Ovis?
That's what I'm saying. Like, so like, in between all of that, see, there's a lot of different things that happen there. Mumm-Ra's influence, say, like, if he was to say, well, like this, he tries to trick Tigra into combining with him, like you said earlier, SKC. But in trying to combine with Tigra, his genetics, somewhere, some kind of mystic connection in his genetics, overrides that, pushes Mumm-Ra out, and he becomes this darker version of a tiger. And through that some kind of weird kind of thing. Wait a minute, hold on. I remember in the 2011 cartoon, weren't they supposed to have been like some kind of like a rebel clan, kind of like the Uchiha at one point? And they were trying to take the fight the lions, weren't they?
I think Tiger belonged to a separate tiger clan, but then they, for some reason, they died out, and he was like the only survivor.
No, but I remember that was a reason for that. They died out because they were trying to overthrow the lions, weren't they?
That I can't remember vividly, but it was some kind of it was some kind of disease or something. That it's like a sickness they had.
Yeah. Okay, wait, perfect then. Perfect. What if the sickness is not really a disease of the body as much as a mind of a disease of the spirit, where the tigers, due to this particular affliction or curse, as it were, developed weapons to actually try to displace the lions as the popular at the top of the Thundering society at that particular point, kind of like the Uchiha tried to do in Konoha and Leaf Village. So Mumm-Ra's interaction with him, or trying to possess Tigra, enacts this disease, makes him a darker part of it, and then he finds out through his like some genetic memory that the tiger did
like a mutation.
Yeah,
you're talking about a mutation of sorts.
Not a mutation, no. An awakening of something that's dormant within his genes already, and like it activates it. And now he remembers that, okay, well, the tigers did have a weapon, like you're saying, SKC, that they did have a weapon that countered the ire of Thundera, just because of what it was. But maybe I'm just confusing the tigers with the Uchiha, and I thought that they died up because they were trying to overthrow the lions. But I think that is probably a good idea. That would probably be a good idea. I think that would actually make the storyline of the 2011 Thundercats really interesting.
It's very twisted. I'll say that much. It's really twisted because we would not suspect the tiger to be that dark,
correct,
or at least be that ambitious to not only take over Lionel's position as leader of the Thundercats, but pretty much leader of whatever universe that they're a part of at the time. Like that's how great his ambitions were.
Yeah.
Well, just keep in mind with the 2011 series, Tigra always felt throughout that series, and they really never really played much on it, was that he felt like Lionel never deserved his position as the future Lord of the Thundercats. So there was always, because Tigra was the better fighter, he was the military hero, and although he was originally favored because the queen could not have had difficulty having children, then the moment she had Lionel, then it all changed, and he sort of he played the second fiddle to Lionel, and he just always felt that Lionel never really had to work for anything; it was just given to him.
Yeah.
So,
And that
so
Man,
with
that
that
was
again is
said,
why the second son theme with its many variations and derivations is
Mhm.
classic, but it works very well.
Yeah, especially for that.
so
It would work.
in essence, then Tigra could have easily became the, I would say, the true antagonist of
Exactly.
the series, because the storyline really would have made it go in that direction. And you
Correct.
could
Yep.
say Mumra could help have been a catalyst of converting Tigra over to his side.
Correct. And then
Yeah,
and then
it's
be
perfect
supplanted
because
by Tigra at the end.
Right,
yeah,
right.
it
Because
works out
he's
good.
already powerful than Mumra by himself. And so if you would if they would have developed him to be more calculated, you could easily see him be the puppet master behind the scenes.
And
Yeah.
again, I call back to something that Faulkner said. The best stories worth telling are the heart in conflict with itself. So what is better than having these two? If Tiger can now become the new antagonist. So now we want the same things, but I think my ideology and my way of doing it is better than your way of doing it. My quote unquote brother, the second son.
Yeah, putting brother against brother.
Yeah, he would have took
Uh,
everything from Lionel. Yeah, I was saying Tiger was gonna take everything away from Lionel. If we kept playing with that storyline, he would have took all the leadership. He would have took his girl, his first love interest in Chitara, or even Pumira if she came into it later on. And even the sword of omens, if he figured out a way to control that, plus the other sword that Atrism was mentioning, like he could have did all that and embarrassed Lionel in the long run.
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm just having thoughts about it all. There would be like some classic lines, man. I could imagine uh Mum-Ra's voice. I too was discarded.
Yeah.
Hey, and you know what? What if Tigra also, and this maybe be something, if you wanted to include it, in the story, what if Tigra would become the key for Mamra being free from being a servitude, where
Yep.
somehow he can finally unlock the powers that he needed, so that way he's no longer under someone else's authority.
Yep.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if? What if? Now, listen. I don't like trope. So trope would be that the Tigers were in control of the Thundering Society before the Lions did, and the Lions used deception and trickery to get power. So that's trope. But one that's a bit more thoughtful would be that the Tigers were like the consiglieres the viziers, the right the right hand most trusted advisor to the kings until Lionel's father used deception and trickery to remove his father from that position or killed him in a fit of passion and then took his wife, and in remorse he adopted his son as his son, who was to be the heir to the throne until he had his own biological son, that being Lionel, and all of the potential conflicts that creates. Now that is a bit more intricate
Uh,
and thoughtful, and creates more storylines.
and if I could add one thing in there, Logic's finest.
Yes, sir.
And Mum-Ra reveals the truth to Tigra.
Boom.
Ooh.
There you go. There you go. Now, see that
yeah, that's good.
storyline. See that storyline again, because I don't like trope. It works, but that storyline is better than the trope story.
Let
That
me
storyline.
show you who you truly are.
Bingo.
And
Right.
you know
Put
what?
them
It
from you. Get
something
back
like
to
that.
position.
Yeah, something like that will definitely grab the audience attention, because it's like you're now building up suspense. Like, do you really want to know your true history?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Get
Man, I
out
feel so
of
bad for
there.
Lionel. God, dog.
I mean,
He's supposed to be the
in the
cool guy.
80s, I mean, even in the 80s animated series, Lionel was always immature. You know, he kind of went through these growing pains as a character in the 80s. But I mean, but there was always this level of immaturity to him where he wasn't, you know, again, he was a kid that he was technically a 20-year-old with the mind of a 12-year-old. And so
Oh, now that
again,
I
I mean,
recall,
yeah,
yeah, now that I recall, Doc, early in the '80s, like Lionel had to go through these trials that the
yeah, yeah,
Thundercats put him in because they
Correct.
knew that he was immature and
Mm-mm.
he had worked on himself.
It
So like
wasn't
he
In
that.
had
order
It
to be
to
was
crowned, in
that.
order
No,
to
that was
be
something.
crowned king,
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
after
yeah, that was
because
it.
yeah, that
when
was the
they
process.
left Thundera, he wasn't 12. He was like 6 or 7. And then when they arrived on Earth, he was like 25, but he still had the mind of a 6-year-old.
Mm.
However, after X amount of time, he had to go through official trials in order to take the mantle of king, and that's when he went through those
Correct.
trials.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I remember it real vaguely, but I forgot exactly what it was for. Yeah.
yeah. And so, you know, I think in many respects, I think in relation to the 2011 series, you know, Tiger was primed to be the true antagonist of the series. Because again, there was a lot, you know, for those who watched it, know that there was a lot of animosity between Tiger and Lionel because ultimately Tiger just felt that Lionel never deserved this position. He wasn't even a good fighter. He wouldn't even trust him to properly defend the kingdom if he had to. And so again, this is one of these areas where I think if you would have gave Mumm-Ra some true character development, yeah, you can certainly put that wedge even deeper between Tiger and Lionel. You know, so yeah, I agree with that.
Man, like
Sadly, that
Now,
didn't happen.
if
I'm just
Yeah,
thinking
because
right
they
now.
used Pumira, not Tigra.
Right.
if you want to add another layer, if you want to add another layer, Chitara. So if you have it that the tigers were historically the grand viziers to the king in a fit of passion, a rage of passion over a woman. Lionel's father kills Tigra's father. In remorse, he adopts Tigra, his son, his heir, can't have kids. Eventually, later in life, Lionel was born. So now, if you throw in that there is a budding love interest, of course, the whole triangle between Lionel, Tigra, and Chitara. But if you throw in another twist, if you throw in a twist that somehow Chitara somehow begins to develop feelings for a fourth individual, and we don't know the loyalties of this fourth individual. Is he for Lionel or is he for Mumm-Ra? Again, just more more levels. Maybe I'm overthinking it.
Mm.
Definitely, I could say if they had really thought this out with Mamra, and especially with the
Mm.
storyline with Tigra, and really kind of push in that direction of having Tigra be, you could say the face of the antagonist, but Mamra being the puppeteer behind the scenes. Mamra could easily be compared to the likes of Magneto, the likes of who else is, you could
Apocalypse, Thanos.
Apocalypse, Thanos. Yeah, like could have easily put him on that level had they really thought this plot line out. Because again, like Law you just said, you could even throw in there Chitra, where okay, she's the love interest of somebody. We could say if you want to like really go through a trope and everything, you can have her say she is the love interest of Lionel, but uh, 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 he doesn't realize that eventually she gets tired of him, and starts catching feelings for, say, Tigra, but somehow there's a betrayal between the two, and now Tigra used that vengeance to fully dive into the dark side, and Mumm-Ra starts to like really develop him into what he wants him to be.
Wait, so are you saying that he becomes a simp for his queen?
I wouldn't say a simp. I wouldn't say a simp, but I would
I'm just
say
making a joke. I was just making a joke. I wasn't
you
serious.
know what?
So
Let me play this because that I didn't really thought like that. I wasn't trying to turn it into like another sip mode.
Neither am
Even
I.
though,
Neither am I. Neither am I.
yeah,
Let's
even though
let's
some people
let's
would
back
interpret
right up.
that, right? Even though some people would interpret that, but more so like because here's the difference. Because in my opinion, definitely don't want to go down the path of Darth Vader, where this dude goes on a killing spree all because of a woman. What I'm thinking of is there's a betrayal between Tigra and Chitra to the point to where he's like, you know what, screw this all. I'm going to take over the whole kingdom as well as the whole planet.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. I think I mean that could be like a catalyst. But I do lean towards the thought of Mumm-Ra showing him that the tigers used to rule, and that's something that has been taken from him.
You know what? That would actually make of a better storyline because there's one thing of betrayal, like a love interest betrayal, but then there's another where, say, you're betrayed by somebody who you thought as family.
Mm-hmm.
SKC, let me ask you this. Would you lean more into the story of the tigers used to rule before the lions, or would you lean into the tigers were the grand viziers and that Lionel's father killed Tiger's father, and out of remorse, he adopted him as his son? I'm I'm just curious because the first one is a bit trope, and personally, I'm not a fan of trope.
No, I would say the second one. But I would play into the thought of um the betrayal being more towards that the tigers were becoming more numerous
Okay.
and and and
Political
to
power.
yeah and to keep them in a certain
Got to reduce
subset
that
of
population.
numbers that they
Easy.
So
yeah.
so
Easy.
kind of like the Prince of Egypt story
Mm-hmm.
where
Yeah.
the 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 children, but in this case you could say the bloodline is killed off because their numbers have gone too much to where they could easily overtake the kingdom of the lions. So,
Mm.
but out of pity, the lone survivor is saved and is brought up within the household.
Yeah, that or I would even say not even out of pity. I would probably have stated um, um, probably I would have it to where Tiger's baby memories would be unlocked almost by Mumm-Ra, and he could actually see Lionel's father killing his father and
Graffiti's
saying
memory?
I and
Nice.
saying and I shall keep your boy.
Nice. I like
Yeah.
that.
Ooh.
Well, hey,
I like
hey,
that.
so you going Darth Vader Force Unleashed with it?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what happened in Force Unleashed with Star Killer. So Vader killed his father, then take Star Killer as his apprentice.
I I liked Force Unleashed, but
Oh, yeah. Good
neither
thing.
here nor there. Neither here nor there.
Yeah, it would be around that thought and to where it would almost be like I would have people actually view Mumm-Ra in a slight. They would have some sympathy for him because they'll be like, man, this is his place, and here it is. These dang lions are coming to his world and trying to take over it and such and such. And he's like, this is where I've always been, and here they are trying to take my stuff just as they took yours.
So in other words, make the Lions, or you could say the Thundercats, as invaders.
That's
How
how
about
Mumm-Ra would view it.
how
That's good.
about this? You could then position the Thundercats in the same position as the Kree. The Kree are not actual heroes or villains. They are all they care about are their self-interest, and they will do good or evil things in the pursuit of their self-interest.
Yeah, that's probably how I would set it up. Yeah. I obviously to offset, everything being that dark. The ideal would be that Lionel, of course, would want to shed off all of that bad history and
Right
become
the wrongs.
a rightful or a righteous ruler. Um, and of course, he would be able to use the history of the other Thundercats that are older than him to teach him about all of the good that they have done. But yeah, that's how I would probably play it like that.
Which again brings us back to the Kree and the Shi'ar Empire, because both are the same. They're not good or evil, but they will do horrible, horrific things, and they will do beautiful, altruistic things. But ultimately, it's all for their own self-interests. So they have hurt as many as they have helped in their self-interest, and then now it's time for a change.
Very,
Interesting.
very interesting.
Well, SKC, you see, that's why, see, me, I lean heavily into stories that are just complex and dark, just dark, 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 and I love it. But I understand you have to have balance, because the truth of the matter is most people don't favor stories that are just dark and just end dark. They'll tolerate the dark, but they always want the bright, sunny ending. So I understand. I get it.
which is which is why fairy tales got that bright ending.
And the
Because
thing is,
originally we
most
know, yeah,
but that's the thing though. Most people want the fairy tales, even if they won't admit it, even if they don't want a silly ending, but they still want the happy bright ending. And when there's not a happy bright ending, they complain, even
yeah,
though it may be literally a better story and a better, more thoughtful ending, a more cerebral ending, but they want the fairy tale happy ending.
yeah. Because we all know that those fairy tales that created they all had much darker endings. But
Yeah. Especially if you go to like the original stories, like
yes, that's right.
say since the media talking about it, like Little Mermaid. Yeah, the original story.
Dude, have you ever
Snow
actually
White.
read any of the stories by the Brothers Grimm?
Oh, the
Listen,
Grimm brothers. Yeah.
dude, be, monsters eating children, beating children, torturing children, tearing them apart. Listen, Germany has a story about their version of Santa Claus. It's a monster called Krampus.
Oh,
So
oh,
Hmm.
okay, yeah. I
I'll
briefly
leave it
heard
there.
about that.
I remember
I'll,
they did a really cheesy horror movie based on that legend.
oh,
So
oh yeah, Krampus.
I
Yeah,
forgot about that.
yeah,
gotta love the Germans. But I digress.
All right. Well, we're not gonna do the whole "Can you survive in this villain's world?" because I think just taking it this direction of what will we do if we were redeveloping Mumm-Ra. This definitely took a very deep dive. So I definitely feel like we got a lot out of this and all. But we're now going to wrap up with final thoughts and everything. And so, SKC, what are your final thoughts on Mumm-Ra?
I thought it was a fun character. Especially when you think about the people in the childhood and all that type of thing. Obviously, I think more could have been done with them, but I feel that way about a multitude of characters, just as a writer. So, but yeah, overall though, I would say probably out of nostalgia, I would give him like a 7.
Okay, all right. JJ, your final thought.
Ah man, so yeah, Mum-Ra, once again, like I said when I first came on, definitely an iconic character. I mean, his punchline alone of the ancient spirits of evil summon this decayed form and all that. Yeah, like who could forget that? Right? And yeah, he from what I remember, he was definitely a serious trash talker. He didn't care who you were as long as you got the job done for him and things of that nature. He definitely had some classic battles with the Thundercats, especially against Lion-O, since that was his polar opposite in the series and everything. But man, I kind of wish I could have seen more of what could have happened in the 2011 series because it definitely took an interesting twist with his diabolical plan against the Thundercats. But if it ever comes back, I will definitely let you guys know if it does, and we'll see how it plays out. If the creators of the series, ever try to continue on with that story or just do another reboot, so we'll see.
Awesome, awesome. H-Wisdom, sir. Your final thoughts?
Definitely a character of his time period, the original Mumm-Ra. Definitely a product of his time. Was designed basically, as Eisen Sama said, basically to be something that the characters, the heroes, can make new toys and weapons against to fight against. That's basically what he was. And in the 2011, definitely a wasted opportunity, unfortunately. And it's probably, if they had actually done it correctly, the series could have gone on a lot longer than the 2011 season. So, uh, for me, nostalgia reasons, yeah, he's definitely one of the most iconic '80s bad guys. So there. So for me, just for stage presence and for staying power alone, I think I would still give him like about maybe an 8.5 to a 9.
Man, right on, right on. Dr. Phoenix, your final thoughts.
Yeah, my sentiments are pretty much as similar to H-Wisdom's as well. He was a character of his time, a product of the '80s. You know, yeah, unfortunately, there wasn't as much character development as there should have been with him because I think ultimately he is one of the most interesting animated bad guys of all time. Certainly has one of the most iconic entrances of any bad guy. Um, to this day, everyone knows it, even if you've never even heard of the Thundercats, but people have heard that iconic entrance. I don't. He very much reminds me much of everyone's ever fans of the Conan films. Remember the original Conan, the Barbarian. You had James Earl Jones' character, who Falsa Doom. Kind of reminds me somewhat of him, but obviously not a cult leader, but nonetheless, very underdeveloped character that really never got the shine it should have probably gotten. And so yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. But thanks for hosting this because again, Thundercats is one of my all time favorite animated shows. So yeah, thanks for paying homage to these guys.
And not at all, Doc, and thank you as well. Mr. Logic Finest, your final thoughts.
Well, first off, Doc mentioned Conan the Barbarian. The first one was James Earl Jones. That's funny because I think I was like 11 when that film came out, and seeing James Earl Jones with what 1980 or 81 um, special effects turn into a giant snake really creeped me out. So thanks for that mental image, Doc. But as far as Mom Ra goes, you know. The best part of this conversation for me was when we explored how we would have changed it, what we would have done, and the various derivations and permutations thereof. So again, for you gentlemen, thank you. I learned a lot, and this was a very pleasant trip down memory lane. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. And thank you as well, sir. And the Dark Lord himself, Isaac Saba, your final thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this was very nostalgic, but uh, being me, I do um, liking much more. How would you say? More methodical and more uh, more art. More arch nemesis type villains that they really put a lot of thought behind everything and put you in a bind. And I understand, with this being the time that it was created, it was just for selling toys and merchandises, other merchandise and stuff like that. I would say he ranks lowest so far on our villains, but it was a very fun discussion, especially when everybody got into how you could have improved the story and everything. But I
In
guess the only thing I leave you with is hey, just don't leave one one slave master to go to another.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say as far as Mumm-Ra and all, great character. His punchlines is something that will always be remembered and everything. Just awesome. But yeah, I think had they really gone deeper in his character development and really pushed for him to kind of like at least maybe be like a puppeteer behind the scenes, yeah, he definitely would have been one of the most, I think, one of the most powerful villains, of the era and all. But hey, one could only imagine. But in any case, thanks everybody for listening in to this month's villain of the month. And just to announce, next month's villain is none other than General Zod. So we will definitely be getting ready for that. And also, later on this year, probably starting next month, there will be some fan votes that will be happening on the channel where you get to help decide who will be the villain for a particular month. So definitely stay tuned for that and be ready to cast your votes to help us talk about these particular villains. But with that said, just want to thank everybody for listening in. Until next time.
Ah, the villains. For every good guy, there must be the bad guy. Society looks upon villains with disdain because they refuse to follow the rules. But are these villains really bad or misunderstood? Are they truly out for chaos and blood? Or are they more willing to get out of their comfort zones than the average Joe? Join us for our Villain of the Month discussion. We will break down their philosophy, their past, and their psychology. And then you decide for yourself if these villains are humans or if they are monsters.